What is up, everyone? Sorry I'm a little bit late, having some technical difficulties this week, but what's up, everyone? It's Thomas with Real Broker here in St. Augustine, Florida, coming at you live every Wednesday, 8 o'clock, maybe 8:05, depending on technical difficulties or not. Coming at you with the market stats, the news you need to know about everything about buying, selling, or investing here in Northeastern Florida, and we're also doing a Q&A, which is honestly the most important part about this. So if you are watching it live or you're watching the replay, throw any of the questions that you have about buying a home in a certain area or selling a home in a certain area, throw them in the chat. I'll come back and answer them live, or I'll come back in the comments and answer them the best I can and however many characters YouTube gives me. So here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. doing this stuff for you guys. So this time is completely for you. Facebook, for whatever reason, wasn't broadcasting. It kept saying I wasn't setting it up to a page. I don't know. I gave it my best shot, but also need to get on to doing this. So try to figure that out for next week. We're going to go ahead and hop into the market stats. And I'm only going to cover something that I think is really interesting when it comes down to our local market here. And it's going to relate to our news stories that we're going to be covering here. So this is the MLS. This is everything that realtors operate here. So this is encompassing all of Northeastern Florida and even other parts of Florida where people just are in our MLS. They'll drop something from Miami in our MLS. So 23,000 homes in total. So what I want to do is just take a look at St. Johns County, and I want to show you how much new construction we have here, because I think this is like a really staggering number. So you can see this is our total amount of listings in the area. So 4,148. Let me take a look at our new construction here. And it comes down to 876. So almost a quarter of our inventory in the market here is new construction. And aside from that, like 876, that's not even, like that's every builder. Like they might have a couple of spec homes that they have on the market. And then that home will represent 5 other homes that they have that are not exactly on the market just yet. Maybe they're still being built right now, but the inventory is probably a lot more than that when it comes down to new construction. And that also adds to our general inventory, right? So it's about, from what we have here, it's about a quarter, right, of our total, well, a little bit less than a quarter of our total inventory here in St. Johns County, which is a huge amount of number. We have 4,000 homes here. We have almost 900 of them new construction homes. So what I like to do then is, I'll show you here, is I want to take a look at the past 6 months. So we can go in here and we'll do the past 6 months. We'll just look at closed transactions. So that's forever, that they have all the dates and everything. So this is going 6 months back. So to November, we have 1,400. Oh wait, sorry, that's wrong. My mistake. Check this off. So take a look here. We have 4,031 closings in the past 6 months in total. That's everything. But then when you add on new construction, we got 1,430. So what were those numbers again? We have 1,430 divided by, let me just uncheck this again, 4,031. What? Why didn't that work? Oh, I cleared it. Whoops, my mistake. Dang it. Okay, sorry. 1,430 divided by 4,031, 35%. So that is something that is really, really interesting to me. Well, actually, it's not super interesting because I know why, right? So 35% of our closings over the past 6 months have been new construction homes. That's a huge a portion of our market. So how are they outpacing everything that, is everything else that's on the market? Surely not everyone wants to live in an HOA. But the one thing I do find is that people, when they're looking for a deal, they're focusing on their monthly payment, right? They want to know how much they're going to be spending a month. They don't want to go crazy. And when you're comparing a resale at $425,000 versus a new construction home where they're going to be buying down your interest rate, it really makes it easy. The people who are like, I hate HOAs, they're like, you know what, but they're going to give me this. I might just suck it up for a little bit and go into an HOA. And that's what we've been seeing. To give you a quick example here, my sister and brother-in-law are going under contract on a Lennar home today, and they've already signed the contract and everything. We just got to wait on something from corporate. But they got a Lennar home for $435,000. They got a 4.35% interest rate. They got $26,000 in closing cost assistance, so a full 6%. So that'll be used to pay their closing costs, and then they'll have roughly like $4,000 to $5,000 that they can use to buy down the interest rate further, or they can, just use to pay. That money goes away, but there was a little bit of money out of pocket for them, so they could pay that out of pocket with that money. So $26,000 in concessions. You also got a 4.35 interest rate, and you also have a community brand new house, washer and dryer included, blinds included, all that kind of stuff. And that's because the market is softer, so these builders are able to add these incentives out. And that's just an example of like why they're a third of our closings here in northeastern Florida, with only representing less than a quarter of our inventory. That's because they have the best deal in the market. So most people are looking for that, right? They want the best deal right now, and they want something, especially when it comes down, everyone's planning on monthly basis, right? Like, what is this going to cost me every single month so I can budget in my mind? And when it comes down to it, all these new construction communities pretty much offer a rate buy down, especially when you're south of 500,000. Once you go north of 500,000, you tend to see more like design center upgrades, sometimes flexing on the lot price. They more or less offer a package like, hey, we have $30,000 in incentive if you want to use it. We'll see if that changes here in the future. But in reality, it's really tough for the people at the bottom of the barrel. So these are the people getting a lot of the incentives. They're also the main buyer pool in our area is $300,000 to $500,000. So those people are really getting the majority of the incentive when it comes down to new construction. So once again, new construction is probably the best deal here in our market, and that's because, one, they kind of control the inventory. In terms of like what's in our market here, most markets don't have the amount of new construction that we have here. I was talking to one of my buddies from up north, and they're saying like, oh yeah, this huge development got denied, and he mentioned like something like 400 or 500 homes. And like, that's kind of a joke here. Like 400 to 500 homes is a small community, like Silverleaf has 18,000 residences in it. So it's one of those things where they have a lot of homes available, right? But they're also slowing down how many housing starts they're doing so that they can kind of control their pricing as well. So we'll see how things shake out in the future. Any comments or questions about that, let me know. We'll head into the market stats here. We'll head into the news that's going to relate a little bit to the market stats. I'm also going to start picking apart some of the news stories that I come across just from the information that I gathered, because for me, especially when it comes down to the real estate world, I don't know if there's so many people like looking at all these news stories when we're looking at like Florida and then locally, and that can tie it all together. But there were some things I was reading today, and I'm like, this just doesn't seem right from my knowledge of the local area. So we'll cover that either way. Any questions, let me know. Let's go to the first news story. And as you know, we always start at like a national level news story. Then we go to a Florida state level news story, if there is one. And then we go to a local news story, focusing around St. Augustine, northeastern Florida. Mortgage rates rose to the highest level since January, but demand from homebuyers still grew. Here's why. Average contract interest rate for 30-year fixed-rate mortgages with conforming loan balances increased to 6.98 from 6.92. Really, that's not going to make a huge difference in your mortgage payment, and it's kind of not newsworthy at all. Applications to refinance a home fell 7% for the week, and that makes sense because most people refinance when you can get a 3, 4, 5% mortgage rate, not a 7% mortgage rate. So mortgage applications to purchase a home were 2% higher than last week, 2% higher last week than the previous week. So mortgage rates rose for the third straight week, and they went 2% higher compared with the previous week, and they were 18% higher than the same week 1 year ago, according to Mortgage Bankers Association. So that's really interesting, right? Because we're wondering like, okay, hey, the market, it's softening, the economy's not doing too well. What's really going on? And I think when it comes down to it, the big news story, and this is something that I don't think anyone's talking about, is how many people are putting off what they want to do, which is buy a home, because of affordability, right? Because of what's going on in the market. And most people would just say like, hey, it's interest rates, right? If interest rates were 5.5%, I'd buy a home, right? And I imagine if we were to get sub 6, we would see the market just take off again. Really, even when we saw earlier in this year when the market went to like 6.3, applications jumped like a significant chunk. So there is an argument to be made that over the past 2-3 years, where we've had these higher mortgage interest rates that we have people who have put buying a home on the sideline, and it's creating pent-up demand. And just to kind of this is a similar but different situation, right? Think of what happened in COVID, right? There was essentially like a 3-month like, hey, no one's doing anything, right? Just dead. And then after that, things took off like a rocket ship. Now that was, of course, fueled by 1,000 different factors outside of mortgage rates. So mortgage rates was a huge factor of that, 3%, right? But also politics, right? Florida was an open state. Remote work, that also became a thing at the same time. So people flocked to Florida and caused a huge spike in our housing costs here. So the same thing on a micro scale is happening right now just because of mortgage rates. It's been 2 years, 3 years of people like, you know what, these mortgage rates suck. I'm just going to wait and see what happens. And there's going to become a point for that, like, okay, let's say mortgage rates stay the same. There's going to become a point where people are just like, okay, they're not going anywhere, I'm going to hop in the market, right? And we see that here time to time. But if mortgage rates do go down, which everyone wants them to, of course, who knows if they will. I'm kind of, on the fence about it. If you expect, hey, we just hit the lowest lows of mortgage rates like ever, right? Some people have a 2.5% mortgage. So what's the chance that it's likely to go lower when the historical average of a 30-year mortgage rate is 7.75%? If I were a betting man, I would say that you're going to bet that it's probably going to go higher, right? So that's where it's a double-edged sword. So we'll see what happens here, but I think there is a good bit of pent-up demand, and once we see interest rates start to go down just even like half a percentage point to get to 6.5 to the 6.5 range, I think we see a different market, not only here locally, but nationally. But that's an if, a maybe, a when, right? We don't know when that's going to happen. We know that the Fed or the government, President Trump, what they want right now is for interest rates to go down because that would be a big win for their administration, right? How are they going to do that? I don't know. I think Jerome Powell is out of there in November. So I imagine that Trump will probably appoint a yes man. But is that going to put us in a better position? Maybe for mortgage rates for a short period of time, for the housing market for a short period of time. But is that in our best interest long term? That is probably above my pay grade to figure that out. So if you guys want to buy a house here, that's my pay grade. So either way, any questions about that, let me know. Let's go on to the next news story here, trying to tie this all in together. Okay, so we're talking about Florida's real estate market. It's time to pay the fiddler as chill sets in on Florida's once hot housing market. Sellers are now getting squeezed, but here's why it's no buyer's paradise either. So essentially just covering what I just said, like, hey, there was a pandemic housing frenzy. People moved here for a whole bunch of different reasons. But we also had 2 hurricanes and then an insurance crisis that pretty much happened right after that. And then we see panic-inducing headlines drawing comparison to the 2008 crash. I didn't cover this in the stats before, I've covered it before, but inventory has gone up, right? And it's gone up in a significant clip. So it's concerning to a lot of people. But real estate expert Vincent Arcuri said recently on Full Circle Florida, I don't know who that is, by the way, interest rates are 6.5%. If you saw interest rates go anywhere in the 5s, you would see the market shift overnight. Properties would start to skyrocket again. So it does have to do with a lot with how much people are putting down and how much is their payment. And that's what really drives the economics of people buying homes. Some homeowners have bought at the peak, maybe feeling the pinch. And I think that's also something that talking with people who have bought homes since 2020, right? If you bought in 2020, 2021, you probably are doing pretty well on your property. You probably have a good bit of equity. If you bought in 23 or 24, the likelihood that you have equity in your property is very low. And that's normal for any other real estate market, right? Like once you factor in fees, like especially real estate fees, but time and energy of selling your house, and then just let's say the market stayed flat since then, which it kind of has. You're technically going to lose money unless you put a huge down payment down, but even then, you're still losing money, right? It's just not realized at that time. So that's the anomaly of like, hey, I made $100,000 on my house and I bought in 2020. That's not normal, right? And most homeowners know that. So either way, we'll go back to the news story here. So inventory is rising. But they say, and this is where I really want to combat this, because they say that inventory is rising, but it's mostly because of condos. And that is due to condos, not single-family homes. The surge is being driven by region-specific factors, new milestone inspection rules, skyrocketing HOA fees, and soaring insurance premiums, all of which are dragging down condo sales. So with that, what he's talking about, just a quick reference on that, is rules for condominiums and HOAs changed over the past couple of years. In 2021, they had the Surfside collapse, so the government put in legislation saying like, hey, HOAs and buildings that are X amount of years old, that are within X amount of distance to the coast, that are 3 stories or above, need to have milestone inspections for their structural integrity. Who's got to pay for that? The HOA. Now, that's not a big deal. That's a really good idea, right? We should have that. Surprising that we didn't have milestone inspections for the structural integrity of buildings prior to that, right? In 2021, we didn't have that. Silly, it seems. But they added that all reserves for HOAs need to be fully funded. And that's where this became a huge, huge problem, where people are getting assessments for double-digit, like $1,000 assessments, like, you know, the $3,000 assessment, that's kind of normal in an HOA. $100,000, $10,000, $20,000 assessment, that is less normal, right? So a lot of these condo owners are getting hit with these assessments because they want to fully fund their reserves so that they can stay within the guidelines that they're putting out there. This has put a lot of HOAs in trouble, and it's put a lot of homeowners at risk for losing their place because they can't afford to pay that assessment. So aside from that, we also had the insurance issue. So insurance went up. HOAs, in terms of when they buy their master policy, their policies went up, HOA fees went up. So buying a condo used to be affordable, used to be low maintenance living, but now you have these large HOA fees. So, and they're associated with that. And then also now they got to fund their reserves. So you're getting these assessments, big problems. But from what we can tell in our condo market here, now we're in northeastern Florida, a lot different than South Florida, but we still fall under these rules. We haven't seen an explosion in our condo inventory. Has it slowed down? For sure. Yeah. Has there been more inventory? Yes. Has it slowed down in terms of transactions? Yes. Not doubting that. But to blame everything in terms of inventory in our area on condos alone is just irresponsible. I just showed you here how much new construction we have. Now we're talking about Florida as a whole, and obviously that's what he's talking about. So region specific. But in our area, that's not the issue. We have a ton of new construction. We have a lot of land that people are building on and continuing to build on, which is a good thing for buyers and sellers because that means that builders have confidence that their prices are going to stay where they are. And they're also going to be able to keep prices where they are if more inventory is here. Because one of the biggest problems we've had over the past couple of years, especially for locals, is affordability, right? So and it's a double-edged sword. Locals will rip me apart. But they'll say, oh, this guy's just a realtor. He wants to sell more houses, or he wants to sell more expensive houses. I want people to be able to afford to live in the area they want to live. You want to live here in St. Johns County, it's getting harder and harder to be able to afford that. By not developing, it's going to get even harder to afford it because then there's less homes for more people. If we keep developing, well, we can at least balance that out and keep the affordability not going up as fast, right? Which is what I personally want. So, either way, if houses go up in price, yeah, I'll make more money in terms of commission, but I'll do less transactions because less people can afford. If housing prices flatten out or even get more affordable, I'll make less commission, but I'll do more transactions, right? So for me, I want what's best for most people. I want affordability. I want people to be able to own their homes. So either way, what do you guys think about that? Am I just a greedy realtor who wants development and I'm just hiding it behind a facade of wanting affordability for people? I don't know. I don't think so. But next news story here. Florida's First Coast region is unprepared for the future. I've never heard of Folio Weekly. I just stumbled upon this. But from sunny Amelia Island down to ancient streets of St. Augustine, a common topic permeates the minds and discussions of northeastern Floridians everywhere. What's happening to our communities? Tales from older residents paint stories of untouched beaches dotted with small communities and country backroads. Now those beaches are overcrowded, the small communities have merged into megaliths of suburban sprawl, and quaint country roads have been turned into endless developments. The zeitgeist of both Florida is dying and more people escape to this more affordable sunny state. However, even now affordability is becoming a strain, and the storm clouds of devastating hurricanes are here to blow down perceptions. How prepared is northeastern Florida to handle affordability, environmental preservation, and traffic congestion in the face of worsening disasters? So, it says, hey, bad urban planning. We've had some infrastructure issues here in St. Johns County, And it's tough because in the past 10 years, through the 2010s, we've seen a 43.9% increase in our population here in St. Johns County. Duval County saw a 15.2% increase, and Nassau County saw a 23.2% increase. So one thing I will say with that is, this is all relative. Nassau County has nowhere near as many people as Duval County, and same thing with St. John's. I mean, we're talking probably close to 1 million people here. So, but St. Johns County right now has 330,000 people. So we had roughly 170 10 years ago. 15 years ago, let's say. So that's essentially the same amount of population increase of 1 million with 15.2. But either way. But St. Johns County proves to be the most controversial, with 350 housing developments in construction, housing prices soaring to a median price of $549. That's actually not true. It's $500,000 flat. It's actually down year over year at like 7%. To accommodate housing has blasted off across northeastern Florida, and that's the truth. Part of this also is saying that, hey, affordability in terms of insurance is a problem, and saying that on average people in Duval and St. Johns County are paying $4,000 annually in insurance premiums. That I disagree with, because I'd say most Floridians most people in northeastern Florida are not spending that. Now, I did a video the other week where it said some Floridians, probably in South Florida, are paying $11,000 a year as an average for homeowners insurance. We don't have that problem up here in northeastern Florida. And that's because, one, we're in obviously a different part of the state. South Florida gets hit with a lot of hurricanes. It's a tropical climate. A lot of, pretty much south of Orlando, kind of Hurricane Alley, you got the Panhandle, gets hit with hurricanes all the time. We've only been hit by only four hurricanes have made only 4 major hurricanes have made landfall here in the past 125 years. Do we still get hit with the bands and everything? Yes, but once they go across the state, they normally lose some steam. We're not getting hit with the same impact as other people. So I did a video about insurance. I covered this exact topic, and I asked my insurance guy, I said, hey, what are you seeing? I want to know what you're saying. Because for me, I'm thinking probably people are spending around $2,500 annually. And he said for a newer construction home, you're going to be spending somewhere between $100 to $150, right, a month. So we're going to be well under that $2,500. If you're buying a home that's older, prior to 2002, your insurance is probably going to be somewhere between $150 and $200 a month. Now, this is all stuff outside of a flood zone, so I don't know if this average is including flood in that, so it brings up that homeowner's insurance premium package as a total, is just like a blanket insurance. Hard for me to say. That's very possible in that scenario. But most homes in our area are in flood zone X, and they're built more than likely, especially in St. Johns County, after 2002. So most people are going to be spending, roughly $2,000 a year on their homeowner's insurance, which is 50% of what they're talking about here. Either way, back to the news story. Traffic congestion. Now, this is 100% true, right? Traffic congestion has happened here, but I don't know. I mean, for myself and many of the people I talk to, I just helped someone who moved from Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is a major metropolitan area. There's traffic. My neighbor, actually, he lives in Atlanta and comes down here to get a break, right? So he comes down here and he's like, man, people complain about traffic here. They have no idea what they're talking about. And that's the truth. I've lived close to Philly. I've lived in New York. I've driven all around the Northeast, and I've gone back and forth on 95 several times, driven through Baltimore, D.C., Richmond area. If you want to see real traffic, that's real traffic. That's insanity out there. Traffic that we have here, I mean, yeah, is it worse than it was? 100% is worse than it was. Is it as bad as some of these metropolitan areas or some people make it seem to be? 100% no, like in my opinion. So if you're a local here and you disagree, please let me know in the comments below. Let me know where you disagree as well, because there are 100% choke points of traffic. Not saying like, hey, by International Golf Parkway, Costco, Buc-ee's, Super Walmart, Home Depot, Bass Pro Shops, all in one location. Oh, and by the way, we also have school drop-off and pickup on the same line. Is that terrible? Yeah, it's terrible. It's not a great area. But like in general, if we're talking about traffic in our area, like, these guys don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to take a sip and I completely forgot my tangent. All right, let's see. No comments. All right, guys. Well, great. We're rolling right through this. I got 2 more news stories, so if you have anything, fire them off in the comments below. On to the next new one. All right. St. Johns County Commission approves funding for St. Augustine's Veterans Village. St. Johns County Commissioners approved $125,000 for Veterans Village operating costs with a recommendation for annual funding. The transitional housing facility, a former Old Town Inn, was purchased with a $3 million state grant and houses veterans with honorable discharges. Funding will support various services, including case management, employment assistance, and medical equipment. So, this is actually something that is really great. It's a 21-unit property right on the, I think I pulled it up here before. Where is it? I pulled up my phone maybe. Here we go. So it's right in Davis Shores. So if you're familiar where like Llama Restaurant is, Mellow Mushroom right here, Veterans Village is right over here. So it's a nice, it was an old motel that kind of fell into disrepair, and they bought it, and they've now made it housing for veterans, and it's income driven. So the $125,000 that they're asking for, probably they've got, but they're also trying to get it annually, is for various services, including case management, employment assistance, and medical equipment. So this is a big win for the veterans here in the area. At least I hope it is. You know, sometimes these programs have good intentions and don't work out the best ways. But I think on top of them just rebuilding that Veterans Hospital out on 207, adding something like this, they also have other facilities as well throughout town. It seems to be a big veteran area here in St. Johns County. Seems that we're taking care of them, which is good, because as they mentioned in the story, a lot of these veterans are actually homeless. So gives them a spot to go. Also on Anastasia Island, like that's amazing. Normally things like that don't make it through because a lot of people are like, I don't want this in my backyard, you know. So I think that's great. It's a good win for the veterans here, and I think it's a good look for the county commissioners. They chime in on that, you know, so they're really happy they got that done. But it's a good thing, so I enjoy it. All right, last one, guys, and this is something that we've talked about before, but I haven't been to the Purple Olive, but it's going to be replacing Gypsy Cab Co., which is a staple in St. Augustine. I literally would ride the bus to school, to Sebastian Middle School, and drive by this every single day. And always wondered as a kid, like, because it was always funky, especially when you drove by it at night, had like neon lights, which was very different for our area, let's say. Definitely when I was a kid, more of a conservative area. So you saw a place like that, you're like, what's going on in there? But it's been there for decades, and June 5th will be its last day of service. And then the Purple Olive, which is a restaurant in Crescent Beach, they're taking over the place. I don't know where it says it in here. I haven't been to the Purple Olive, but I've heard a whole bunch of good things about it. I've been meaning to go. So maybe this will be like one of the things like, hey, I'll go to Gypsy for the one last time, and then I'll go to the Purple Olive and check that out as well. Gypsy Cab's always had some good food. Changed hands a couple times, but it's always been a good spot. Had a couple friends that work there as well. So it's the end of an era, right? But like I said before, it does seem that the old guard of restaurants, some of those staple restaurants that have been there for a while, are starting to go away. And there's pros and cons of that, 100%. But you know, just another one we covered was a commercial property on St. Augustine Beach, Jack's Beef Pit Barbecue, which is essentially like an outdoor bar, but they also got like an actual pool. They also have a pool table in a brewery there. That was for sale for like $8 million or something like that. I'm not sure if it's sold, but I imagine if someone's going to put that kind of money into it, they're going to change it pretty significantly. So that's just what's going on here. And more than likely, I think Purple Olive, from what I know about it, is a higher ticket restaurant than Gypsy Cab was. So it seems that everything's being pushed over to this fine dining, whereas like very, very casual before. Everything was very casual. But now it seems like we're going in for this luxury fine dining type of feel in the majority of the restaurants here in St. Augustine. So not necessarily a bad thing, but it is sad to see that change for sure. But guys, awesome. Been here for 30 minutes, covered a whole bunch of stuff. If you have any questions about anything we just covered, throw them in the comments below. Reach out to me directly. We're here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. going to the market stats, the news you know about, everything about buying, selling, or investing here in Northeastern Florida. And we're doing a Q&A. And we had no questions tonight, so I had no answers. But appreciate you guys being here every week. I'll see you next week. Have a good one.